You're with Julian on the Brown Note in Movie Madness. Could be reviewing 5 films in 1 week, I think. After a lot of albums. This is Firestarter, a review of Firestarter, a film proudly sitting on 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. Absolutely crucified by the critics. This is the next film I'm going to review is Morbius, and they're both sort of symptomatic of this where we're at now in filmmaking. The relentlessness of repackage, reboot, remake, and that we get. I've got loads of lorikeets outside now. Bet you'd rather watch those. Actually, I'd rather watch those than Fire. No, I wouldn't. Where we're making like these new adaptations of things or remakes of things that were never great in the first place. Firestarter, the book by Stephen King, was never really a major Stephen King novel. Though it has a lot of elements that are classic Stephen King, with regards to, children with powers and these secret societies of people that exist in the margins that have got connections through their powers, like in The Shining. And a lot of those elements are sort of integral to a lot of Stephen King's mythology universe. You could imagine these characters traipsing around in the same world as the kids from it or something like that. But the 1984 original film was never great. It was not something that was screaming out to be remade, and yet here we are. And I think at the time there was another film that came out called The Fury, which I actually remember a lot more. There was a lot of these sort of late 70s films, scanners, I guess, to a degree, that had this sort of mythic power thing that was always very destructive and resulted in death and destruction. So I don't know if that was that era, but it wasn't screaming out to be remade. We've got a relatively new director, Keith Thomas, and a Blumhouse production could be great or it could be really average, and this has got a very low budget for this kind of thing and has been crucified. We get Zac Efron and Sidney Lemon as a husband and wife, and when they were college kids, they were experimented on by this group of people that were trying to imbue them with special powers, and they all end up with slightly different powers. Sidney Lemon's powers seem to be throwing plates around with telekinesis, and Zac Efron's powers are that he can manipulate anyone into doing anything, so he can use his mind over other people to control them. But their daughter is the problem. So they've been on the run since their daughter was born, and she basically set fire to everything around her, and it's quite clear what her special power is. She can set fire to things, but as she becomes 8 years old or 10 years old or whatever she's supposed to be in this film, she starts encountering the fact that she has no control over this incredibly dangerous power she has, which lights up at school due to the fact that she's bullied a lot. We find out she's different to other kids because they can't have the internet, because they don't want to have any sort of connection to the outside world because they're being pursued by this nefarious NSA secret laboratory world. So they make sure that they stay off the radar as much as possible. Can you hear all those birds? Shut up. Minor birds are so annoying. And that's where the film really kicks off. So we've got a paradigm of the mother, Sidney Lemon, wanting to train the daughter, who is played very well Ryan Kiera. Yeah, Ryan Kiera, maybe her debut in a film. I thought she was really good, actually. She is, the mother wants to train her to control the powers. Zac Efron wants her to suppress the powers. And they're at loggerheads over how to do this. But once it blows up at school, they send Michael Greyes as John Rainbird, who's, I think, alluded to have Native American heritage. He's one of the people they experimented on in the program before they got to Zac Efron and his wife. And it went much worse for him. So he's sent as a bounty hunter. He's sort of living with the trauma of what they did to him and his powers, and he's a ruthless and unstoppable killing machine. He's sent after Zac Efron and kills the wife about the halfway stage. And I mention that even though it's a plot spoiler, because no one really seems to care. It's like Zac Efron and the daughter go off on their merry road trip and don't really seem that bothered. So there's a clunkiness at this stage of the movie, which I totally get. I didn't think it was terrible, apart from at times. But it wasn't awful at this stage. The one thing it's really got going for it is how short it is. It doesn't hang around. It doesn't develop any characters, but it doesn't pad out sequences. We get through everything at such a rate of knots, so I kind of like that if you're not going to really bother with much writing. They head off on a road trip to try and escape because the mum's been killed by the Rainbow character. And they encounter this guy, and that's one of the first times that I actually thought this film was a lot better than critics have been saying. Guy that lives on the farm, and the daughter discovers that the mum, or his wife, is actually virtually in a coma, paraplegic, that has been in a car crash, and that she's been sitting in this chair for 20 years. We later find out that the car crash was actually him, the guy that they're staying with, drunkenly crashing and killing their son. So he's got this really dark past. And a lot of these people with powers can also kind of read minds, so they've got this heightened sensibility about what's going on with others. And we have, I thought that whole sequence was really quite good. But after that, when we actually, everyone goes back to the secret laboratory to sort of bring an end to everything that's happened, I thought that final third of the film was actually fantastic. This is a film that, if you really appreciate sort of like the last 15 years of horror movies, low-key, low-budget horror movies that have harked back stylistically, musically, visually to a certain 70s, 80s sensibility, and there are lots of them. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but that feel like they could have been from that era. I think if you like a B-movie that is, stylistically harking back to that era, I think this is a lot stronger than it's being given credit for. And I found the final third, which is always a good third to make by far the best in the film, went a bit batshit, went a bit crazy, and had some really interesting sort of stuff that happened. And the way that the denouement sort of panned out, almost like The Road, where they're on that dystopian film, The Road, where the kid ends up on a beach and is sort of like carried off to safety by others. And I actually really liked that last end of the film. And some of there was a sense of danger around the kid's powers as well. And I like the fact that the villain and the protagonists form this bond. But star of the show, undoubtedly, is absolutely magnificent music by John Carpenter, arguably the architect of the soundscape of those late 70s and 80s horror flicks. His synthesizer soundscapes are incredibly influential. He's been much more of a musician. I featured his last album, or album before that, on my radio show, which was only about 4 years ago, I think. He's developed a musical style all of his own that is hugely influential, and I sat through the credits for one of the best of those sort of late 70s synth-led horror themes for about 5 minutes since Goblin Suspiria main theme. It is magnificent. So the music is fabulous. And I actually quite enjoyed a lot of Firestarter. Zac Efron wasn't really much. He wasn't bad. He was okay. The little girl I thought was much better. Again, I can't remember her name. Ryan Kiera Armstrong, I thought she was really good and affecting as a kid. And the Michael Grayeres, if that's how you pronounce it, as Rainbird, I thought his character was really interesting, and he was quite a strong performer. The people who were playing the secret laboratory NSA types were never that interesting. It didn't really do it for me. But I walked out actually thinking actually I kind of like this terrible 11% film. So I'm going to give it a, if you want to get into that whole B movie 70s with a great soundtrack and a brilliant final third, I'm going to give Firestarter a 7.5 out of 10. Shocking, I know.